Maybe.
Not getting the confirmation I usually get. I think we're running. The timer's not running. Oh, the timer. Yep. We're good.
Okay. All right, we'll call to order the November 29th, 2012 meeting of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee at 7:03. And we'll start on our right over here with our introductions.
Bob Burns.
Patrick Sweeney.
Lynn Betteridge.
Mike Mitchell.
Don Smith.
Brian Burke. Marty Birch.
Denise Kai, staff.
Scott Archer, staff.
Okay, so everybody had a chance to look at the minutes of the October 25th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those? Motion to approve
the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
All right, approved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The minutes are approved. Citizen comments, and there are no citizens present, so we'll sail right through that one and move on to Metro local share funding for open spaces.
I'll give you a brief review, and then Denise is actually going to give you some specific information about some trail stuff that we're talking about. I think you're familiar with this issue. We've talked about it a number of times. The Metro local share funding that we received from the Metro bond measure that passed a few years ago, and we received close to about $940,000 or $50,000. We've made two purchases with that money. We contributed towards the Glen Oak Road purchase a few years ago, and then the property that we bought in Kenema a couple of years ago. We have a remaining balance that we need to utilize specifically for the purposes outlined in that program of $340,000 roughly. And we have been talking here at PRAC and also with the City Commission about how do we want to prioritize the use of those remaining funds. Some of the priorities that were initially on the adopted list that we put together when we first put our agreement with Metro together have changed a little bit, and so there's been that discussion recently. A little while back, you remember that I reported to you that the City Commission had talked about their priority being that their desire would be that we would attempt to use this for acquisition of property that leads to connections, trails, and connectivity in our city and in our parks and so forth. And so we reported that. I think we've talked about it at the last two meetings here. We've kind of gotten a little bit into the conversation, but at your last meeting, you specifically asked if we would bring back some maps that we could look at, and also some information from our Trails Master Plan, and then potentially some recommendations for you that you could begin to get your hands around. The City Commission asked the Parks and Rec Committee if you would eventually work through this discussion and make a recommendation back to them in some capacity. So that's kind of where we're at. So that's the quick background on it, and then what I've asked Denise to do is put together. She's printed off some maps and put those at your place, and then we've got a nice big aerial photo map here on the wall behind us that we're going to be talking about, and Denise is going to give you kind of a quick snapshot of what we're looking at in terms of our connections and our current trails and our lack of connections and things like that, and then we'll just kind of do that as sort of the kickoff to the conversation, and then let you ask questions or take the conversation wherever you want to take that. And I think I've got a few more comments, but I'll hold those until Denise is done. So, Denise.
So what we did is we took a look at the Trails Master Plan, the update, and the gap analysis that we just finished not too long ago. On the one with the, the picture insets, the one that actually is pointing to Kenema, it says Singer Creek Park, so we do realize that edit needs to happen. So, but in looking at this, Oregon City is topographically, geographically has some constraints to our trail systems. If you get a chance and come over here and look at this larger map, you can see how developed and how street gridded we are in Oregon City versus if you take a look across the river at Westland, how many big patches of green they have and how many buffer zones of green, linear buffer zones of green they have. We're very different in that aspect that we're highly developed over here, and there's a lot of where the trees have come down. So a lot of our open spaces have already been occupied or are outside of the UGB. So some of the open lands that we could be potentially looking at are not in the city. So what we were looking at is that those green spaces that are still occupied within the city limits are, a lot of them are where our stream beds are, which are protected areas with setbacks of about, well, they used to be 10, 20, I think they're up to 50 on the setbacks now. So your developable land has to be set back 50 feet from the creek. So these are protected areas already, and I don't know that we would be able to develop right alongside the stream beds our trail systems. So we do have some constraints, but we also have some opportunities that we'd like to look at, but whether that's viable for the Metro Local Share project or not is kind of our crux. So in our gap analysis, we looked at a couple of places. One of them was down along, coming off of the promenade and connecting the promenade up to the Kenema area. And then once you get into the Kenema area, you can get through the park, Kenema Park, and up into the Metro properties where they have some trails up in there over to the old Pioneer Cemetery over there. So for my discussion with Scott earlier today was that, we've gone from Gladstone on the trolley trail, that little bridge there that connects over into West, connects all the way into the Cove property, over into Clackamas, and from Clackamas you can get into John Storm, 99, and that's pretty contiguous now. And from 99 you can cut across streetwide over onto the Main Street area and get up into Promenade and the elevator, and so we have some connectivity already going there. My suggestion to Scott was that it'd be nice to look at that section in the gap analysis between the Promenade and Kenema. However, it's probably more easement than it is big pieces of property. And whether or not we can gain those easements because they are owned is another, an obstacle to look at or an opportunity. So that section is where we're looking, and we're not naming specific properties, it's more conceptually areas. The other part that we came up with as a area in need is from Chapin Park to King, although when we looked at the gap analysis, King was still an elementary school. So King's no longer an elementary school. Does that still play into our hierarchy of where we wanted to get that, safe trail route over to the park and from the park to the school, since they were so close together? So we've looked at those. A lot of our other areas that we've been looking at as far as connectivity are still bike lanes, sidewalks, roadways. And so the difficulty for me was to actually say these linear sections of property or areas that we might want to acquire or look to acquire in the future to make connectivity areas from trails or parks or from parks to new trails or different sections of the city. So I had a little bit of a struggle and had that conversation with Scott, and we really took a good look at this, and I'm struggling to put out some really good pieces that are purchased pieces versus what we have as right-of-ways already, or we could possibly be looking at lease agreements, because our connectivity areas are mostly streetwise in the city proper. So if you guys want to take a look at this larger map, you can kind of see what we're looking at because these are really not as indicative to what we have when you look at the street level. So if you guys want to take a quick peek, it will give you a good concept of what we're talking about here. So we'll take a pause really quick, and you guys can come over here and look.
Denise, I've got a question. When we made our parks tour this summer, we went to the top end of Waterboard Park and parked in that little parking lot and headed out to the, we didn't go on it, but headed out to the, what was that, east. There was a trail that was a little confusion of whether or not it was really an easement or not, or it was just sort of the neighbors allowed it or whatever. You remember that?
Going the opposite way of the park there?
Yeah.
Going towards Fifth.
Yeah. I don't know if we ever resolved that question exactly.
Where does that end up?
It goes down the hill, and I think it pops out on Fifth. So there is a city trail that I think that kind of works its way into there, if I'm thinking of what you're talking
Okay.
about.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
So if you're parked and you're facing the bluff, you would go right,
Right.
next to the house that's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
remodeled. It's kind of a billy goat trail right
Yeah.
through there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But I think doesn't that lead into the developed
It-
pathway that's
It
down
does
there?
lead into our developed pathway. I'm not quite sure.
And where does that pathway end up? Down by on Fifth by Singer Creek
It
Park.
pops out
Down below.
even below
Below.
that. It pops out where when you come down Singer Hill on Lynn, and you round the corner and it becomes Fifth Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Just after that is where it pops onto.
Okay.
It's
pops
almost
out
at the end of the tree line.
Okay.
And
Dairy
there's a
Queen
pillar.
Street. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Clear down
Dairy
there.
Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Okay. So then, then we walked down to the bottom of the hill, and ended up at the Public Works property.
Right.
If you wanted to get from there to Kanema Park,
You do some road transit down towards the PG property, and then you can cut. You can cut down. There's a little bit of a gravelly road that comes up to that road that I don't remember what the road's called. I'm terrible with names. The one that goes down the hill from South End, that first one. There's a little bit of a shoulder that people would walk, and then you can go down streetwise down into the Kanema area, or you can go down further, come across like you would go towards the PG property, take the little goat trail that's already established, and connect up.
Yeah, so we were kind of talking about that one PGE property maybe being a good idea to look at connecting up at some point. But
because if you're talking about from clear over to why am I forgetting the name of that? The Willamette River, all the way over from the Willamette River Trail and that bridge over to Gladstone and around and the prom, and then if we can figure out a way to improve from the prom to Kanema, and then Kanema to the bottom end of Waterboard, and then up the hill, and then that other trail, now you're close to,
This
Yeah.
is the one that we've promoted.
right.
So, and then the other inset from the Gladstone.
Yeah. You got a pretty good chunk of a big loop there.
We've got a pretty good chunk, and with the 99, the boulevard improvements down there, and the boardwalk, it makes it pretty scenic. And now the bridge is done, but once you get past the end of the promenade, there's the gap, and that gap exists from the upper and the lower side.
one of the things, this is a good time to mention one of those other things I was going to kind of wait to talk about a little bit, but so keep in mind, I mean, we're kind of on a couple of different parallel pathways, no pun intended. There's discussion about trails and connectivity, which is something that we're always talking about and looking at and thinking of. And then there specifically is the issue of the local share funding that we're trying to identify some priorities to potentially go out and utilize those funds. One thing I want to remind you of is that those funds are specifically for acquisition of open space, not for development, not for any kind of maintenance. And one of the kind of tricky things here, we're talking about maybe things like easements or some other arrangement besides just outright purchasing a property, is I don't necessarily think those types of things are going to qualify for this use of those funds. So there's nothing wrong with having this conversation. I want to make that clear, and that this is good conversation. But when it comes to the discussion about making potentially some recommendations about those local share dollars, you do have some parameters that are given, within our agreement with Metro as to how we can actually utilize those funds or spend that money. So that's where I think what Denise is trying to paint a little bit of a picture is it's going to be difficult for us to really go out and just find some good properties that we can say, there's half an acre there, there's a couple of city lots there, whatever, that we can just go and negotiate and purchase maybe 2 or 3 of those to make some really nice connections. Those are going to be tough to find that make sense. We're really looking at over-the-street connections or existing connections, or possibly like this thing, that PGE property. We can talk about that one because that's kind of a utility property, but you're talking about easements or things of that nature. So if we're focused on using that money for acquiring property that will help us make trail connections, it's going to limit what we can do, and it's a little bit. The more Denise and I really started delving into this, it became pretty obvious that this is going to be challenging to do that. So, and so that's a little bit of a segue. I don't mean to steer your conversation on, and by all means, you can go back to kind of talking about the different linkages and things. But I guess the last thing I was going to mention is with the use of those funds. And just a reminder, I think I've mentioned this to you, we extended our original agreement with Metro. There was a 5-year intergovernmental agreement. That expired this last spring. We renewed that or extended that for a 1-year period. More likely than not, we can extend that further again. I think it ends in April of this coming year, and I've been given an indication that it wouldn't be a problem to extend it again if we're in the process still of trying to figure it out. But one thing that we can do that I just want to put on the table for you is we can apply those funds to retroactive purchases that we've already made, and then that way basically the money would come back to the city. One thing, it's money that is either kind of use it or lose it for Oregon City. If we don't use it, it goes back to some other fund and it doesn't get used by us. So depending on how whether we're able to identify particular properties that we can acquire for this purpose or not, we do have the potential to look at utilizing that. For example, the purchase that we made going on about three years ago or so on Leland Road that connects to West Leland property, Park property, that has the house on it that fronts Leland Road. We purchased that property just by use of our SDC funds only. We could that property qualifies for the use of these funds. It's the parameters of that fit. And I've talked to Metro about some potential things like this. You can apply for some retroactive uses of that money. So it's sort of like we're paying back our park account for something that qualifies for the use of those funds. And then that assures us that at least we're able to use that portion of the money, whatever that, I think we spent roughly $150,000 to purchase that property. So we could potentially do a retroactive purchase agreement with Metro, and I've already spoken to them. A lot of agencies do that kind of thing. So then you're basically paying yourself back for the purchase of the open space, and that actually frees up some of your park development money for other uses. You're not constrained. Then that money goes back in our general park development fund, and then we can use it for all the purposes that you can use the Parks SDC fund. We're not constrained just by if that makes sense. What I'm saying makes sense in my mind because I understand this and I deal with it a lot, but maybe, if I'm not explaining that well, please let me know. So I just wanted to present to you that there's some different ways of some things that we can think about here and make sure those are on the table. I think you had a question over there, Mike.
Well, it seems like that's the way to go. That's a lot more flexible, isn't it, use of the money? Where
It is.
the grant money is for one specific purpose, the acquisition.
Yes.
If we could do what you've suggested, or I'm not sure you suggested it, but as an alternative,
Well,
that money could be used for operation or maintenance or any other
well, for
purpose.
the purposes that it would pay back the SDC fund, so you're still limited a little bit, but you can do development on top of acquisition with the SDC
more
fund.
flexible.
So, you know, when we get into things like developing the Glen Oak Road property, if we're looking at a dog park at some point where we're going to use some portion of SDCs, you know, it'll put some additional money back into that, and it still fulfills the purpose of that program because it meets those parameters. And again, though, it wouldn't be all of it. For example, that purchase was roughly $150,000, and we have $340,000 still available through this program. So we could, but it could be a chunk that we could do, and then maybe still find something, you know, that works for this purpose to purchase or what have
Are
you.
there other examples, Scott? You mentioned one, but are there others that would
Qualify
qualify?
retroactively.
I'm trying to.
How far back can you go?
Well,
retroactively?
just within the time frame of when the program was passed, so it's basically roughly a little more than 5 years back. That's the only one I can think of. That's the last purchase that we've made that we already didn't use some of those open space funds for. We just use only Parks SDCs for that purchase. So that's the only one I can think of that would be that kind of an example. But I just wanted to put at least that one out there.
So does this grant money, does it have to be connected to, you have to show that you're trying to make linkage between the parks? Or if we can't make linkage property targets, then you could just use it for outskirt purchases or something, outskirt of the...
It's for...
In other words, you use it regardless?
Yeah, we've said, as of right now anyway, the commission's discussion and then our couple of discussions we've had here with this committee, that the commission said they would prefer that we would try to use that for making trail linkages. So we're kind of putting that parameter on ourselves for now anyway. There's been no like formal action, nothing like that put into place. So it's just in the discussion phase. So really what that program is for any qualifying open space or natural space kind of a purchase. So the linkage part of it is what we're talking about because we've said this maybe is what we want to just look at. And what I'm suggesting is it might be difficult to come up with enough specific properties to target to be able to use those funds for. And what I'm trying to do is to find a way to make sure that we get those funds because it's just, it just goes away. It goes back into some account in Metro if we don't use them. So it's our opportunity to basically use it or lose it. Yeah. Does that answer your question? So we're not restricted for the
Correct.
For the
It's
linkage
not
for
specifically
that.
to that. But
Yeah, we're just having that conversation that way because the city commission at their work session a while back said that's what we want to try to do. So that's kind of why we're trying to flesh this whole thing out and figure out if that's even doable here or not.
I just had a follow-up question. You said you weren't sure if the grant money would pay for easements. Is that what you said?
Right.
But if we did this other procedure, those dollars that were freed up could be used for easements. Is that correct?
Yes. Basically yes.
Which would help the connectivity issue, perhaps.
We needed before we did a bunch of research. We wanted to kind of have the conversations and see where things go, so we don't spend a bunch of staff time or spend a bunch of time either on the phone or in meetings with the Metro staff that oversee this program, investigating something that we may or may not even need to know. So once we have these conversations, then we'll know. Let's go focus our energy on this direction or whatever. That's why.
If you applied it to a past purchase, then there would be no timeline on when you got to use it. I mean, it's basically refunding a prior expense.
Yes.
Just seems like a no-brainer to me.
yeah.
I mean, one way it's real convoluted and uncertain, and the other way puts the money where it puts the money there.
And again, though, that would just be for that amount that purchase was. So we wouldn't be able to grab that entire amount that we have remaining and put towards that one purchase, because it was, like I said, it was roughly 150,000. It might even be just a little bit under that. So just for that
Well, it
amount,
still leaves us some money to.
So we'd still be
to
looking at
spend,
a couple
which I
hundred
really-
thousand.
so that might be
I really like that.
you know,
That
roughly about half of the money. Then we still have another half of it that we'd need to identify some ways to put it to good use. So yeah,
You can buy, you can purchase property.
yes.
that's
So
it.
why aren't you looking at purchasing property for like a, for your dog park and stuff like that?
Well, we could.
The-
But where this conversation came from is the city commission had a work session, a few months ago or whenever it's been at this point, and basically we're pretty unanimous in saying we'd really like to look at ways of using this for connections. But they deferred it. Then they deferred it to the Parks Committee to investigate that further, and that's where we're at right now. So, whatever you want to come back to them with the recommendation, nothing like that is off the table as far as I'm concerned in terms of our potential to use it that way.
Not to play be the pooper and devil's advocate, but if we wind up acquiring more land, that is going to take operation costs then. So this grant is going to wind up we're going to need more money to for general upkeep of this property, right? So that's also something that's going to have to be weighed, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
What kind of maintenance would each property wind up entail bringing to the table of our maintenance crews to have to keep up with?
Yep. There's a cost to free money.
Yeah.
You're exactly right, Patrick. That's an excellent
Unfortunately.
point, and something we need to think of.
So, I mean, it seems like if trail linkage would be primo, but if trail linkage, if it's not really directly connected to that, and we wouldn't want to just blanket purchase it because that's more upkeep we're going to have to keep up that property, unless it's property given towards a targeted agenda item, like say a dog park, where it's going towards the general
a use
focus.
that we've already planned for or something.
Right, something planned.
I was at that work session, and the commission did make it clear that linkage was their priority. But we've talked about this before. How do you go out and how do you buy 20 feet wide by a mile and a half to make any kind of meaningful linkage? I think if we go back to the council, back to the commission, and say, there's the problem. You really can't use it for that. We think we have to look at these other ways of using. I think they'll be agreeable to that, even though they were very clear that trail linkages is what they're looking for. But
Do
I don't know how you buy that.
do they have any of them have their own pet idea? Do they have an idea maybe that why it's such a priority to them?
Nothing specific that I'm aware of. There was, I think, the one example of that discussion has been the Kenema area, where you've got the metro property, you've got the two city parks in the Kenema area, and then we did acquire one of the two purchases that we've made with this local share money has been we bought the parcel in Kenema that connects to the metro Kenema Bluffs property. And there are some adjacent properties that keep going basically north from that on that same road. It's the main road there. I think it's Fifth Avenue is what the road is, if I'm remembering that right. We did some investigation into some other properties. They're basically undeveloped and in a kind of just their natural state. We talked to some owners, and at the time anyway that we've had those discussions, the prices that they wanted have been far above what we found to be realistic in those discussions, just for the purpose of linkage, because they're thinking developable property, maybe putting houses on the frontage on the street, and then they go up the hill to South End where it's nothing really developable, but those are the kind of things that you can maybe put a trail in. And so far, we've had no luck with those types of conversations in terms of anything that would be realistic price-wise. So I think I think that would be the only example that I know of that maybe some of the commission might be thinking of or had been thinking of, because those have been discussed. And in fact, that's why we purchased the one property that became available and was, offered at a reasonable rate to purchase, and we had those funds available. And maybe to continue that might be about the only thing that I can see where you actually have some properties that you can line up and look at purchasing, but the price has been so out of bounds that we just haven't had any more conversations there. I'm sorry, but so for your point, Mike, is you really don't typically purchase, how do you purchase 20 feet that's a mile long? You really don't. You get access by easements in leases and things like that, where you're just getting some type of access to a part of somebody's property. And those are tricky, but you can do them. But they're not usually purchases. They're different types of arrangements. So I'm sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's fine. I think part of the linkage, I think you're right. Purchasing property sections is extremely difficult. But, you even look on the map and you look at Myers Road where it's a bike lane, and then the bike lane ends. And I see it every day when I go to work. People have to go onto the street if they're riding or running, or run on that, about 6 inches of gravel before it hits the ditch. I think those are great linkages. I know people use a lot. I see people running and riding their bikes all the time in the city. And those can help us get us to those trails. And I know that doesn't really fit into the purchase part, but it helps maybe fulfill what the council is looking for, is kind of linking our city together. And at times that might be the city's best option, is bike trails and sidewalks.
It says a lot for the livability of a community as well. How do citizens want to use their access?
Yeah, I know it's getting off the topic, but definitely I hope that there's conversations about everyone's priority is linking these parks, as Denise put together or talked about a little earlier, about we should find a common ground or workability with Public Works and Transportation to arrange a network. I mean, it seems impenetrable, the neighborhoods, we want to connect them all, but it's all, the infrastructure is already there. We just need to dedicate and allocate specific spots for bike lanes and for walking and crosswalks, where you can encourage pedestrian movement from park to park within and through the neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are gorgeous, and we definitely need more connectivity with simple signs and crosswalks and things like that.
Those were identified in the gap analysis for the TSP. So we did chime in with the TSP as well as some of the electronic gateways they've given to feedback and input to the TSP, sidewalks, bike paths, bike lanes,
Crosswalks.
Signage, crosswalks.
Yeah.
They put a litany of those things in there, and we agreed that some of these are accessible to our parks and would be, in our eyes, a priority. So
Yeah.
we've been having those discussions through the TSP process.
Because all these parks are foot distance, and definitely bike distance, and it just seems like it's the perfect answer. And low budget too. I wouldn't say low budget, big low budget, but compared to purchasing property and stuff like that, it's definitely small change.
And we are, I think we've mentioned this before, but we're continuing to look for those types of opportunities where we might be able to do some signage, just to do some simple connections. And it's a long process, but we're going to continue to work on that. And Denise has mentioned the TSP, that's Transportation System Plan, that the city is undertaking right now, which we're updating that, and so we're going to look at those opportunities. So we're going to keep working on those types of potential solutions as much as we can within the resources that we've got available. So
I personally think that we look at an acquisition for something like a dog park with the money. Because I've lived in Oregon City, I was born here, and I just don't see where you're not going to use roads to access to get to the different trails unless you start going through people's yard. You can't do that. Everything's taken. And,
Yeah.
so I think instead of losing the money, we need to look at purchasing something that is needed for the city, and that's dog park. That's my opinion.
And I
My
just
last
wanted
one.
one
It's
other
only good for 30 more days.
clarification, if I could, about the mapping, because about a year ago, we talked a lot about Newell Creek and adjoining 213, but it looks as though that is outside the city limits, is that correct?
Quite a bit of Knoll Creek is outside of city limits, and portions of it are owned by Metro.
And there are not existing trails?
There are trails
Like at the
in Knoll
top?
Creek. They are,
Almost.
I'll let you say
Not,
that.
not
Yeah, I could say it.
not formal trails.
Yeah, there's a lot of homeless people that live down there at different times of the year,
Yeah.
and so they create their own paths.
It doesn't have they're circuitous routes to nowhere. So they're not a contiguous loop, which would be something that Metro or the city or the county would produce.
Right.
These are little goat paths to a hovel or a space away from everybody. And then they tend to end up being nuisance pieces, areas. And it's unfortunate, but then, the constraints of Newell Creek are that it's wet year-round. So, in the trail planning process for Newell Creek, it would take a little bit of extra engineering and thought processes to have something that would stay maintainable.
Right.
And so
it's
it just
pretty
hasn't.
steep,
It's
too,
got.
isn't it? Yeah.
It's steep, but if you've been in Mary S. Young, there are some doable options. However, they're high maintenance options. So that planning process has to take into account your O&Ms, your operation and maintenance of those facilities, if you choose to challenge into that area. It's not insurmountable, but it is a monetary decision.
Far from ideal.
It's something too we could go towards Metro and say, hey, this is something we'd like to see in our community, because Metro owns a lot of that property, and
do.
that maybe that's something they could work on themselves, possibly.
Or Metro County partnership, since a lot of it is outside of the city.
Those kind of in the Metro owned property in Newell Canyon, and then up at the Kanema Bluffs. There are some thoughts that are a bit more longer range. I think the Kanema Bluffs is probably closer range in terms of doing some trails planning. So that's Metro's property, and they're going to kind of work on some of their things. But we can certainly, work with them and talk to them and give them our thoughts and recommendations and that kind of thing.
Because I think also Metro is looking, they're looking at the Kanema Bluffs area, but they're also looking at the other side of 213 where the old railroad used to, is it the old railroad line?
Yep.
So it's the old railroad line that used to go down, and they're looking, they have a conceptual plan out that shows a system going down on the other side of 213. So their projections are not,
When you say other side, which side do you?
so if you're looking
Park Place?
downhill on the outside.
If you're going down the hill, it's on the right side, so whatever that
So the
southeast or
Park Place-
whatever that side would be called.
Yeah,
Okay.
towards the
Access.
Park Place area.
Access, yeah.
So and that's less,
Old railroad track.
but it still has, it has the bridge there, so there's still some constraints even on that side. So,
Yeah, there's an old railroad line on that side.
yeah. So there used to be enough contour that they could run a railroad there. So I think that's what they're looking to target, at least in their conceptual plan.
13 kind of came to my mind, the downfall of it being so much up and downhill, because I was thinking about and I don't know whether it's West Lynn or Lake Oswego or both of them combined or the county or whatever, but the huge trail project from Rosemont from the top of the hill at Rosemont all the way connecting over to the dog park at Lake Oswego.
Westland Lake Oswego.
They're doing it together. But, they had all that undeveloped land alongside the road that they were able to grab onto. And we don't have many places like that other than 213, where we've got any kind of lengthy road that's not already built up on both sides.
They had a prime opportunity.
Yeah, it's going to be
I think
gorgeous.
The key to those kind of things, and you probably just kind of said so, is as things develop, you jump in and work. You've got a plan in place, and you say, okay, when these develop, we want you to, put 10 more feet on the site, and multi-jurisdictions involved, whether it's the county or the cities, and like in 213, it would be ODOT. ODOT on the roadway, right away, however far that extends out beyond what you see there, and then you get into metro-owned properties like what Denise was talking about, and not to say those opportunities still don't exist, but once something is developed out, it's more challenging. So.
Yeah. Anything else on this?
Just one final thought that just popped into my head. Any value in discussing with the school district or the community college for access in any way they link up with where our existing parks and trails go? And they own an awful lot of property.
We already have some opportunity accesses, but with the schools, it's after school hours, not always an open time frame.
Right.
The college, their campus is open, so their trails that are there existing already
Right.
are used by the community at large, and quite often.
I was thinking of linkage. I know their trails are there, but
The linkage is still streetwise.
Yeah.
I mean, we just don't have any, the properties that are next to them are occupied properties. So unless you're looking at identifying properties and putting options on properties for future purchases, and that's something you just don't have a time frame on. So you can always put an option out there, but then whether that time frame comes into fruition in the time frame you're hoping, you could get 3 properties and still have a gap. So the thing with doing options is that you can option a lot of these properties, but you may get 1 gap, 2 huge gap. So, what's your time frame to make that a completion?
Anything else? Okay, we'll move on. Willamette River Water Trail Memorandum of Understanding approved.
Nice.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Man.
So this is just to let you know that that we have now officially signed the MOU. This is something that you, as a board, previously reviewed and gave your support to. And then we, in a work session recently on November 13th, we discussed this with the City Commission, and they were supportive. And so therefore, actually, I signed the MOU, which is kind of a staff level thing. But the document is contained in the information that I sent you, and I think I previously distributed the draft of it to you. It's the same thing, and so just for your information and awareness, that as a follow-up piece, that we've now signed and entered into this memorandum of understanding. The City of Oregon City is one of the numerous partners on the Willamette Water Trail, and it's just basically a pledge to work with all the other agencies along the river to provide opportunities for what a water trail means is basically a non-motorized boating use of some type of a canoe, a kayak, a raft, and that the jurisdictions along the river would that have property. So we have some river frontage on the Willamette. We have Clackamat Park, Johnstone Park, Sportcraft, etc. That you have amenities that are available for people to access and to come onto land, and whether it's restrooms, picnic areas, access to walk up to a restaurant or stay overnight at a camping area or something like that. So this is just basically a formal pledge that we're going to work on collaborations that might exist, and you might hear more about this, and it's going to be a long-term, ongoing thing, and I think it's a really positive thing for us. So,
3 years since I heard it last, or first time?
well, it's been in the works for quite a while. Yeah, it was a concept a number of years ago. I think we probably talked about it, and then it's taken some time to kind of materialize formally. So yeah, it's a good thing. And that's it. It was just a follow-up to let you know it's been signed, and we're part of that partnership now. So.
Okay, thank you. Parks Open House Event 2013. I asked Scott to put that on there. We've talked about doing that next spring or summer, and I think we've all agreed that it's a good idea and it's something we want to do. I just wanted to get it back in everybody's mind again for a couple of reasons. First off, we got to start putting some ideas on the skeleton, some meat on the bones or whatever. So maybe for the next meeting, if everybody could do a little homework and think about what parks should be part of that. I know we've talked about, do we include some parks that everybody does know about, and maybe there's space for some bigger activities, and then add in a few that are kind of hidden gems or whatever. So maybe at our next meeting we can talk a bit more about what particular parks we think should be part of that. And the other thing, on the weekend, the Willamette Falls Festival, when they reopened the Arch Bridge, there was a geocache event that was part of that. I picked up the paperwork on that, and that's something that we also talked about. Maybe we might want to make a part of that parks event, from getting people from one park to the next with prizes at the end or whatever. But anyway, if anybody have any thoughts on that open house idea at this point, or should we talk about it more next time when everybody has a chance to think about it again? Okay.
Sounds like January.
I guess we move on.
Moving on.
Outgoing PrAC members, unfortunately. But like I said before, I don't recall accepting any resignations. So we have Marty leaving, we have Lynn leaving, and we have Patrick
Yes.
leaving.
Actually, wasn't sure.
Well, I talked it over with my wife, and
She was more sure than you were?
she's more sure. She's more sure. Unfortunately. So, we're saying goodbyes. Am I on? Yeah, I'll have to not jump in and reapply. I'll have to sit out for a term or so. But it's been an honor, absolute honor, working with, of course, Denise and Scott leading the way through all the information. You guys are amazing. And Mike for your leadership. And, of course, Brian when I first started. And it's been super educational and informative and great thing to be involved civically in my local government. So it's been a good experience. Thank you, guys.
Well, I'd just like to say, from me personally, and I think from the group, I want to just thank all three of you. One of the things, when I made that presentation to the City Council, I talked about how what I thought, we had a very diverse group, a lot of different opinions, a lot of different hot buttons and personal involvement with our parks that really helps kind of get all viewpoints offered. And all three of you have definitely added to that. And we're sorry to see you go, and thank you for the service. And we're going to do a little
Yes.
something afterwards.
So
Hazing?
if everybody- what's that?
Hazing?
It's too late for
Save that for the
that.
new members.
Yeah, we don't want to scare away potential applicants. So.
Are we getting any applications?
So yeah, there is going to be a little, just a little cake ceremony afterwards for everybody if you're able to stay or at least take a piece of cake home with you or something. Yeah, you serve for a number of years and you get a piece of cake. So, hooray!
Watch. My wife bought that, sorry.
Yeah.
I got one.
So as far as the process and filling the positions, we have one applicant so far for 3 positions. So the numbers don't work very well there, but we do have one applicant, and we've we have re-advertised the opening since we didn't receive as many applications as we'd like to fill the spots. And so we're going to continue to make efforts to put the word out. And I've said this before, but again, if any of you know of any interested people in the community that would like to serve, please, by all means, have them get in touch with me, and I'll help them apply. And so what I'll likely be doing is for our January meeting, we don't meet in December, so that's why it's the 3 of your last meeting. At our January meeting, I will plan to set up interviews like we've done in the past, probably the hour prior to the meeting, if that still works for everybody. I think that's worked pretty well in the past for us. And by then, maybe we'll have more than the one applicant, or maybe not, but at a minimum, we'll have that one person there, and hopefully we'll have some more applications that we can be looking at that point. So that's our process. And they're just open until we fill them, so we'll just keep working on that.
Does the Pioneer Center representative, is that handled a little differently, or is it just publicized the same way, and we hope somebody comes up who's involved in the Pioneer Center?
A little bit of both. It's just publicized that way. It's in our bylaws that we have a standing Pioneer Center representative, and Lynn has done a great job with that. So, and you've just been a great member as well, not just focused on the Pioneer Center, but you've really done such a great job with that. But anyway, and I think you were on the committee because Kathy Wiseman kind of sought you out and said, hey, you'd be really good at this. So we're doing the same thing and trying to find, so we kind of look at, we've got our staff trying to identify potential good representatives from the Pioneer Center that are people that are active participants there that might also be interested in serving. And we haven't found anybody that fits that very well just yet. There haven't been anybody that has been interested that has been asked, as far as what I've been told. So we're going to continue to look on that way, and then it's just generally advertised that one of the positions is for the Pioneer Center representative. So, yep.
Okay.
Great.
Well, once again, thank you all. PrAC member reports. Marty, we can start with you. You might as well go first since it's your last meeting.
My report is I'm done. 2 terms is all I can do, so I have nothing else.
That's a hefty chunk of time. Thank you.
I have nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing from me right now?
I had asked Kathy for a final report, and she's really excited because she's put together and looked at her fundraising events from the time that she's been hired, and it is pretty phenomenal because we know that having a healthy fiscal base makes a real difference to being able to continue and to expand. That she said that the trustee accounts raised in 2012 were $31,930. Funds raised in 2011 were $25,767. A difference of an additional $6,000 plus. And when I think she's got this backwards, because the Pioneer trustee balance upon hire was was $265 total. So less than $300, and the current account balance is $42,000.
Wow.
And the Meals on Wheels trustee balance was minus $77.91 and is currently $44,767 with a total amount of $87,000. They've spent $162,000 plus on Pioneer Center upgrades and $22,000 plus in grant monies for direct services. Participated in the grant process for funding the 3 buses at approximately $156,000 per vehicle. Also, just in this last month of November, with Thanksgiving being the holiday, they got out 22 extra holiday meals, boxes, food boxes delivered, and there were more than 80 energy assistance applications processed too. And then I think you all got this report. It's just a really viable, important center for our community. And, you know, I always fall back on calling it the senior center because then people go, aha, you know. But it really is in many ways a community center, and we can all be proud of it as a resource. And I know living outside of the city limits, you know, it's like the library. There's so many wonderful civilizing opportunities and influences that are available for those of us who can come in, and we really appreciate it. So it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
No reports from me.
Pardon me. Well, I have a short report. I'm on the South End Concept Plan, representing the Park and Recreation Committee. We had a meeting last night. It was a very interesting meeting. Just some basic information that came out last night. The plan includes 611 total acres, and there are 580 households currently there, and 296 developable acres. The study includes land use planning, zoning, transportation, and the estimated right now that's going out South End Road, about 10,000 cars a day use that particular road. It's amazing. The study also includes public infrastructure services, natural resources and environment, parks and trails, and at some point we'll be involved some way, I guess, Scott, I'm sure, and housing and commercial, and the commercial market. They have a lot of input procedures. Public meetings, last night was one. They've had 5 or 6 so far. They're sending out flyers, news articles, and newspapers, 3 or 4 of the newspapers. Groups such as the Chamber of Commerce, neighborhood associations, churches, and information technology. All kinds of feedback they're getting. So far, they've had 5 or 6 meetings, and the most recent was last night. It was in McLaughlin Elementary School. And the next meeting will be the public meeting December 13th, and they're hoping to get a large turnout. And, of course, everybody's invited from here. That'll be 5:30 to 7:30 at McLaughlin School again. Their early feedback is really interesting. They're keeping track of all the feedback through their public outreach. Stay rural. They want parks and green spaces, possible light industry, wide streets and sidewalks, safe neighborhoods and schools. The main challenge they see is the sewer system. They mentioned last night that would be a huge challenge to get everything hooked up to the sewer that has to all run north and end up out in the sewer system out here. Early tension, I guess there's always tension in these things, is the rural versus commercial development. That's starting to pop up in the early information, early feedback, and that's predictable. Of course, the plan must eventually be approved by the city with the recommendation of the committee, Metro, and the state. And they emphasized last night this is a long, long process, several years, and we may not be around to see it happen.
Wow.
Anyway, it's very interesting, and I just wanted to give you a brief report, and so that's my report.
Good.
Any questions for Bob on that? No? Okay, we'll move on to staff reports.
A couple quick things for you here. Let's see. The Clackamas RV Park, just to keep you posted on where we're at on the process there. We have our RFP basically drafted. We're nearing the advertisement of that. The reason we haven't advertised it yet is because we've been working on making sure, been working on some site plan approval stuff through our community development planning department to make sure there aren't any major hurdles or constraints that before we advertise this that we need to address in the RFP document, and so we're kind of wrapping those, having some of those discussions and trying to wrap those up. But we're pretty near advertising, and then as I've mentioned to you before, we'll be wanting to put together a selection committee to help us hire the architect, the consultant that we bring on board to do that, and we'd be looking for some PrAC representation on that, and we'll definitely be in touch with you about that, keep you posted. Don't know if we'll get to that point before our next meeting. If we do, I'll just communicate by email or phone and let you know what's going on. Tomorrow is the annual major cleanup day at the Mountain View Cemetery. Every year, Larry Potter and his staff and a bunch of volunteers do a major cemetery cleanup, and they spruce it up and plant a bunch of bulbs and and clean up all the leaves and all that kind of stuff. And we get a lot of help from the Junior ROTC program and the Oregon City Optimist Club, as well as our we have a Friends of the Mountain View Cemetery Board group, kind of active citizen board there that helps out as well. So just mentioning that to you. And then before I pass the baton to Denise, if she has anything else to mention, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Patrick, Lynn, and Marty for all of your service. You've been really good to work with. I think Mike said it really well about the spectrum of talents and knowledge and different things on the committee that everybody has, and it's been the last couple of years have been the best time as far as the makeup of the board since I've been here in terms of the breadth of knowledge, the numbers. I mean, we've had a full complement of 9 people, this is a big city board. A lot of the boards are smaller numbers than this, and just the fact that we've been able to occupy the positions and not just fill them, but that you've all been so active and engaged, and you bring so much to the table. So I just I appreciate all that you've all three done, and just can't say enough about that. Serving your city, and it's been great. So thank you very much. And then, are you going to mention about the restroom project? Okay.
So, gosh, I got to follow that. I too appreciate you guys. It's been Marty was here when I started, so I'm going to miss you. He's been the mainstay for the PrAC meetings for me, and coming in early and getting to chit chat for a few minutes. So I'm going to miss those chit chats.
I can still stop. I'm a citizen.
All right, stop that. But I thank you both as well, because the viewpoints you brought forward have been a breath of fresh air, and especially when the senior center has been probably not in the forefront as much as some of our other things, and it's been nice that you can bring forward a lot of what's been happening over there, and that it's not just a low-key center, that we really do have a lot going on over there. So I do appreciate that. We've been busy. We have an RFP out for a design build for the Rivercrest restroom. So we had the grant, the local government grant awarded to us for $150,000. We're matching that with our SDC funds. And we will hopefully have a brand new restroom in Rivercrest before the season opens. So that design build concept and everything, the RFPs are due December 4th, and then we will proceed from there in selecting the contractor. We also are engaged in the pre-app with building and planning, and so we're moving right along with that project. And then the Parks Department, Cemetery have applied for a Veteran Memorial Grant, and so their application was accepted. So now we're just waiting for the process to continue, and we're really hoping that they're a contender in that grant process.
And on that, excuse me, Denise, thank you all for your quick responses and support when I sent out that email. We had a short timeline to try to get a letter put together from from this committee, and you all responded like immediately, and it was great. So thank you for your support on that, because we needed that for the application and the timing with being, before we were going to meet again and so forth. So, excuse me.
And if you haven't noticed, the trail news is out, and the new bridge is highlighted on the front cover. The bridge looks amazing. So the other thing, I think you guys got these at our last meeting, and they are still available. It's the walking and biking map. And I think, let's see, the last thing, we did do a couple of Halloween projects, Swamp Swim down at the pool. So they had a pretty good showing at that site. What did Larry call that event?
The Haunted Cemetery.
The Haunted Cemetery, due to the weather, was canceled. So unfortunately, we didn't get that one off the bench. He is forecasting to do that next year. And we had just a couple people show up after it was canceled. So we're looking forward to putting that one on next year, though. And then the Spirits had quite a number of people show up for that. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it was like 200, a lot more than they had reservations for. So all the activities in the city went off without a hitch, and other than Larry's, in the rain. But yeah, I think that they're excited to get going for next year. And speaking of next year, we are already gearing up for the movies in the park and the concerts in the park. That's it for me.
That's it.
Okay. I'm going to jump to other business, and I've got a couple of things. One's a question, Scott. I saw in the notes, and you mentioned that we're going to the RFP for the RV park. So it feels like the RV park has kind of jumped to the top of the stack. I particularly compared to Glen Oak. And I know you can only tackle so much at a time, but I'm wondering how the priority came about.
I wouldn't say that its priority is ahead of that. I think the timing is just such that we've been trying to advertise for design services for the RV park for quite a while, as have we for the Glen Oak project, and we've got kind of the work divvied up among the staff. Larry Potter that's kind of been assigned to him as a project, and he's been trying to get that off the ground for a while, but then all kinds of things going on with his area of operations. But we've been trying to get that one done and just basically out and advertise so that we can get somebody working on that master plan. We are still working on. We're in the process of getting, preparing to advertise for the design of actually not just Glen Oak, but you remember the other one.
Filbert Run.
Filbert Run, thank you. I was thinking Hazel Grove because that's what it used to be called before it was Filbert Run. But we're trying to do both of those and potentially doing them under one contract. So that's still in the process of, we're getting pretty close. There's just a little, this one just kind of is just getting out there on the street. But the RV park design is probably going to be a much quicker, simpler process as well. It's not as hefty of a project in terms of the design part of it. It's a little bit more straightforward. So we're still working on the other thing. If you're concerned that that's fallen to the wayside, it hasn't.
Okay. Kind of still on the Glen Oak topic. A thought with, we know all the good work that the high school construction class has done. And with Glen Oak sitting where it does, right next to the high school and right next to Clackamas Community College, would it be anywhere in the realm of possibility and make any sense to develop the master plan for that park with those assets instead of going out to somebody who's going to charge us? I don't know how much those kind of things cost, but or is that something that a group like that would be capable of doing, or is it just too complicated?
Liability.
It's, well, yeah, man.
Concept plan.
It's
It's what?
if you want the key is you've got to have a product at the end that you can go out to a bid and actually contract out with a set of bid documents and things like that. So you could do, I think with what you're talking about, you could do a rough conceptual plan. And if that's what you wanted to do first and say, let's do that, then you certainly could look at doing something like that if you had the willing participation from those, from either the high school or the college. I don't know that. Does anybody happen to know? Does Clackamas Community? I don't think they have. I know they don't have a landscape architecture branch, but do they even have an architect program there? Does anybody know?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think they do. I'm just trying to remember. But anyway, you could certainly do that, but you need a licensed landscape or architect when it's all said and done to officially stamp plans, because those are going to be. Actually, Marty, you were right when you said the word liability. There is some. You've got to have some things that are going to, be professionally engineered at the end of that project that you can take out and say to a contractor, this is what we want to build. So we could do what you're saying. It would get us to a certain point, but it would be basically kind of a rough schematic.
Yeah. So that would be more just of the public process, the public meeting process, or early on to get those groups involved.
Right.
But it has to come down to something that somebody can bid on.
Yeah.
So okay,
Yeah.
that makes
So-
sense.
Yeah.
It was just a thought. And one more thing, and then I'll stop. From everything that I'm reading and hearing, and certainly in my own neighborhood, the pace of new home starts has skyrocketed, which I think must mean our SDCs are growing faster than maybe we budgeted for.
We anticipated a little bit of this because we knew that those were coming along. That they, most of those new home starts, I think, are in that multifamily development area near the high school, and there probably, I think there's a few more homes off of Maple. That are going in? Is that what you're talking about?
There's 20 new houses being built right now
Yeah.
within a quarter mile of my house, and there's the infrastructure is going in for 60 more. That the last time I talked to the builder, he was going to be building houses by the end of this year.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm wondering is how much money is there, and,
Right.
and how's it growing? So are we going to be able to pull off any of these projects?
We're going to get a
planning?
little surge of some SDCs for the next year. I was talking about and I forget the name of the project now, but the one that's near the high school with all the basically townhomes that are. That project started a few years ago, and then I think the developer had some financial issues and sort of lost that property or whatever, and somebody came in, and bought the development, and then basically is developing all those. So there's a pretty good little influx of that as well. What I'm hearing though is there's a few little bursts of development that are going on, and then there's nothing else in the pipeline after that. So what you're seeing happens to be right in your neighborhood area.
Uh-huh.
There's not a whole bunch of that going on everywhere, although that does translate to your specific question is about the influx of SDC money that we'll be able to utilize towards projects. So we're going to be looking at some budget analysis on what the revenue looks like. We anticipated some of this because we knew those projects were kind of getting ready to go. As we do our budget prep, we look at what's in the pipeline. But from what I've heard, just actually very recently, I had a conversation with our community development director, and it's sort of like it's almost like a little false sense of that there's a little housing boom going on in Oregon City, but the reality is it's going to be those that you see right now going on, and then because from the point of putting in an application for a new development to all the land use and the platting and everything, and then to development is a 12 to 18 month process, and there aren't any new applications going on right now for any more development. So you're going to see this little burst, and then we're going to drop off for a while again until some more development applications come in. That's how I understand it, and that's what I've been told. But the positive is there's going to be a little blip up in our revenue that we're going to definitely, it's in those SCCs come in, and they will be in our in our development account, and we'll, as we get into our budget season here in the next couple of months, we're going to be taking a look at what there is. And if you want a financial report on what our SDC account looks like, I'd be happy to provide that to you.
Can
I
you
can
do that?
certainly do that. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
absolutely. I can give you a, the current cash balance basically of our SDC account. When you look at that, you've got to remember that there might be some outstanding things that haven't been paid yet or something, so it's not the exact amount that we have available. But yeah, we've got a little. We get our reports, and I watch those, and there's definitely been a little uptick in our SDCs. But I know that not to look at it as a complete trend. It's just going to be a short-term thing, and then I guess it's going to kind of quiet down again. Is what I understand. So, but yeah, I'd be happy to share the SDC information with you. That's
Cool.
public finance information. So I'll probably just email something out to you, and if you have any questions, you can let me know.
Yeah, the lot of big trees that was the first time I ever had anything to do with Prac is now streets
Turning
being
into those
built.
houses. Yeah,
Unfortunately.
That's-
Well, unfortunately and unfortunately. Yeah.
yeah. That's partly probably why you're sitting where you're at, isn't it?
Partly, yeah. That's what got me interested in it. Okay, any other new business?
I had a question about this report, the monthly city parks report. I don't know if this is the right place to do that.
Sure.
I was just looking at, one is, I think when we do the RV park development, I myself would like to see a way that we can ensure that the dump station's getting paid what it should be getting paid. And I've thought of some ideas about how to get that done that I'd talk to you afterwards. I think that number could be 3 times what it is, that $16.75. Because I see a lot of people that just come from nowhere, don't put money in a box and then dump.
It's just a donation.
But, right.
It's not a set fee.
We'll come back to that when we're not have a camera on us. The other question I had is, how much is the public aware in any publication that these facilities are available for rent?
Oregon Trail.
Yeah, we advertise in our trail news actually one of the first few pages. It talks about picnic shelter facility rentals and that type of thing.
And is the trail
And
news
it's online. And it's online.
distributed to public and business?
It's every
21,000 go out, and it expands. It's city limits. However,
It's direct mail.
it's
is
direct
what-
mail, so it bumps out a little bit depending on the routes. If the route pops outside the city, that route gets a few more outside the city.
I get it in
Every
Redmond.
And they're going
every
to,
address in the 97045,
including business addresses now.
Yeah. mhm.
Yes.
Every address, right.
And then another thought I had was that, are there any of these facilities signed that says you can rent me if you call, blah, blah, blah?
Good question. I don't.
A few of them. I don't think all of them are, because we've actually had that conversation.
You did with someone else. It would not be above me to have forgotten that you and I talked about it.
The conversations have come up in different venues, yes.
I see, okay. And then how does that, the cemetery revenue how's that happen? I mean, are we selling spots, or how's that?
We have a number of things. We sell plots, and there are different prices for different plots depending on locations. We sell cremain garden plots as well, which are lower priced. We have the mausoleums spaces that we sell, the crypts. We have revenue that comes in from purchasing headstones. So we work through the providers that provide things, like headstones and those types of things. So we get revenue from those and order those on behalf of the customers that order those, that are doing a full. You basically buy a full burial package through our. So a lot of different sources of revenue. Yeah,
I got more questions, but I'll ask you those offline.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
you bet.
Anything else? Okay, our next meeting is in January 24th. Once again, thank you to Marty and Lynn and Patrick. And happy holidays and happy New Year, and we'll see everybody in January. And meeting adjourned at 8:26.
Pretty good. That's good. That's really is.